Well, I guess I should say, does anybody have any questions right now? And I know you're going to learn a lot of acronyms in this class, but rest assured you'll get used to it and you'll become familiar with what they say. So when I say FLSA, you'll know exactly, oh yeah, that's what she's talking about. Don't expect you to know that quite yet, but we got to start somewhere. So this is not a touch screen. Shoot. All right, so the Fair Labor Standards Act. This law was passed in 1938. What was going on in 1938? Think back to your history. God, that was almost 100 years ago, getting close to 100 years ago. Depression, right. We were at the tail end of the Great Depression, which started, well, the crash was in 1929. The Depression part probably started about 1930 or so. The 1930s, then we had great economic upheaval worldwide, not just in this country, where we saw very high unemployment rates, we saw childhood poverty, we saw elderly individuals in poverty, and we decided as a society, this is part of the great society that Franklin D. Roosevelt had implemented, we decided as a society that we were not going to accept that, right? Before that, there really weren't many employer or employee protections. You went to work, you got your paycheck, maybe you worked 15 hours a day, maybe you were 10 years old and you worked in the mines alongside your dad. Maybe it was dangerous working conditions and people were getting hands amputated. It didn't matter, right? You didn't really have any rights as an employee. Well, we decided, and the Great Depression was really the impetus for all of this changing, because really, when everybody's making money, we're all fine with that stuff, right? We're all, okay, well, but we're all making money, so it's okay. But then once the economy starts to go south, then we start looking at how can we change this? FLSA, and you'll find that a lot of these laws, like the FICA law was also instituted at the same time in the 30s. A lot of these laws, a lot of the laws surrounding the, what's the word I'm trying to look for? The stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange, all of that came into being around the 1930s as well. All of those protections started about the same time. Fair Labor Standards Act passed a minimum wage law. Now, obviously, back in 1938, minimum wage wasn't $7.25 an hour, but that's what it is now. It gets increased. The only way it can be increased is through an act of Congress. Congress has to agree to increase the rate. It's not automatic. So that's why it has been this rate since 1998, something like that, a very long time. It hasn't gone up. Now, right now, there aren't a whole lot of people making $7.25 an hour because the economic conditions, the demand for employees is just too high. But that is the minimum wage. And we get that minimum wage through the Fair Labor Standards Act. Overtime pay is also mandated through the Fair Labor Standards Act, which says, generally speaking, those who are working on an hourly basis, if they work more than 40 hours in a week, have to be paid time and a half for their pay. That means they are paid, if they're paid $7.25 an hour, we have to multiply that by 1.5 for the hours over 40 in that work week. So that's what the overtime pay is, and that is mandated through the Fair Labor Standards Act. There are some other lesser known parts of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Equal pay for equal work provisions are within the FLSA. There are also there are some limits to the FLSA. Not every employer is actually required to abide by the FLSA. There are certain laws, they have to be involved in interstate commerce or in the production of goods and service for interstate commerce. That's because this is a federal law. The only way for federal laws to take effect is if there is some sort of exchange between states. Otherwise, if everything is within one state, then the state laws will prevail. Now, it's awfully hard not to have it be engaged in interstate commerce these days. You send emails across state lines, if you send mail across state lines, if you drive across state, you're engaged in interstate commerce. So it's very hard not to be engaged in interstate commerce. So for practical purposes, the vast majority of employers are subject to the FLSA. There are certain different minimum wage rates as well, which we're going to get into more details about in chapter 2. So that $7.25 an hour doesn't necessarily apply to every employee in the country, and we'll look at those exceptions when we get there. The next one, FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act. This as well, we'll talk about it more when we get to chapter 3, but this was instituted in the 1930s. Also, we have 2 taxes, one of them OASDI, there's another acronym, Old Age Survivors Trust Fund, and Federal Disability Insurance is what that stands for. So we know it is Social Security, but it provides more than just retirement benefits. It's got several facets to it. And then also, your book refers to this as HI, Medicare tax as well. So those 2 taxes fall under the FICA umbrella. So when I say FICA, I'm talking about both of those taxes. When I say Social Security, I'm just talking about the OASDI. When I say Medicare, I'm just talking about Medicare, but they're both part of FICA. Both of these taxes are shared by the employee and the employer. I don't know if you knew that. So those of you who have received a paycheck, you're not the only one that's paying that FICA tax. Your employer is paying an equal amount of FICA tax on your behalf. So all of that goes and counts in toward your account. Also, FICA tax is applied to self-employed individuals, and we'll get into that a little bit. Again, income tax accounting, we get into it a lot more detail, but we do talk about it a little bit in this class. But for our purposes, remember, we're the employer. If somebody is self-employed, that's their thing to deal with, right? We're looking at it from the employer's perspective here and what we need to calculate. Then we've got our income tax withholding laws. So we've got federal income tax and state and local income tax. Now, like I said, Iowa doesn't have any local income taxes. We have lots of other types of taxes that are local. We have local sales taxes. Each county has its own, or each cities or counties have their own sales tax, and then we have a statewide sales tax. Each county has their own property taxes. But as far as income taxes go, Iowa only has a statewide income tax. So federal income tax is, from our perspective, we're going to talk about the income taxes that are levied on employees. There are lots of other types of income taxes. There are income taxes that are levied on dividends, interest income, investment income, capital gains, all different types of income. We're not worried about that in this class. We're just talking about those that are levied on the wages of employees. And the amounts that are withheld from paychecks. We're also not concerned about what do the employees have to pay come April 15th and they're filing their tax return. That's their problem. You want to learn more about that? Take income tax accounting. That's where we'll talk about that. But for here, it's just the amounts that are withheld. A couple of different methods for doing those calculations as well, and we're going to go through those. This is chapter 4. Okay, so after the midterm, this is where we're going to get into the details of this. And we will talk about how income taxes are withheld from paychecks in Iowa as well. This is a big chapter. This is the one where I give about 5 or 6 days to go through it. I can't remember exactly which, but we spend a lot of time on this chapter because there's a lot to learn. Chapter 5, the unemployment tax. We have what's called FUTA tax, another one of those acronyms, federal unemployment tax. Again, this is a tax that is only assessed to employers. This is federal unemployment tax. There is also a state unemployment tax, which in Iowa is only paid by employers, but there are some states where employees actually do have to pay some amount toward it. Okay, these 2 taxes, the federal and state system, work together. Again, that's chapter 5. All right. Any questions so far? All right. Okay, one of the the things I want to show you as well are some of these web links that I've got within. I'm going to open yet another version of Canvas. You'll see that within each chapter, I've got some additional information for you. So if you want to learn more about, you've read the chapter and you want to go dive a little bit deeper about regarding some of the laws and things within that you learned about in the chapter, because it's not going to go into a lot of detail on this stuff. But I went out and found some different articles and things online that may help you to kind of widen your understanding. So I had mentioned that the Department of Labor is in charge of the FLSA. Here's the Department of Labor website. This gives you a rundown of everything that the Department of Labor does, and there's more information about the Fair Labor Standards Act. So if you want to read about it from a different perspective, all of that is there. This is just a site that kind of gives some state-specific information on anti-discrimination laws in different states, not from the federal viewpoint, but from the state viewpoint. Same organization about employment laws, what employee rights there are. Now, this is a good question. Are you entitled to paid vacation days? Anybody know, have an answer to that? In Iowa, are you entitled to paid vacation days? Nope. You're not entitled to any vacation days. You're not entitled to any sick days in Iowa. Now, some other states may have different rules regarding that. And there are some states now that have paid family leave as well. I think Oregon now has paid family leave. Iowa does not. At the federal level, there is no mandate on paid vacation leave. There's no requirement that you're given that or paid sick leave. There's not even any requirement that says that if you call in sick, they can't fire you. Now, there may be certain instances where you could sue the employer if they do that. What's that?
FMLA.
Yes, there are certain other types of laws that may govern that. But if you call in sick and you're not really sick, there's nothing that protects you from that, right? Or if you call in sick because you stubbed your toe, something like that. But you would have to sue them under those laws. So there's no actual law that protects paid sick days or paid vacation days or anything like that within the state of Iowa. Like I said, other states are different. Other states have some wider protections. And everybody has their opinions about that stuff. We're not going to get into the opinions about it, but just know that there are. So this particular site kind of gives you some things to think about with regard to employee rights. So meal and rest breaks, again, that's going to vary from state to state, what they have to give you, what the employer has to give you. Paycheck City, so this is, and I don't think, yeah, they do still call it Paycheck City. There's a free salary calculator in here. If you're curious you can enter in all of your paycheck information and find out what your net paycheck is going to be. And do some calculations. So this is something that might come in handy on a personal level, as well as when you're doing some homework to double check information. History. If you're a history buff and you want to know about the history of taxes in the United States, so here's an article about how taxes, if you can put up with all the ads there. National Archives. Here's a copy of the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which gave Congress the right to levy income taxes. So there's your text to that. All the National Archives, by the way, this is kind of a cool site. Everything within the National Archives is up here. So there's the original document. So if you're into that kind of thing, and then another article about the origins of income tax withholding, how it came to be. Remember I said that the income tax withholding itself was a result of World War II. Now there were always income taxes that were required, well, at least since 1913, when the 16th Amendment was ratified. But the withholding didn't actually happen. So if you can imagine living between 1913 and 1945, I think it was 40, I don't remember exactly when it was. Anyway, sometime in the early 40s. And you owed income taxes, you'd have to pay it all at once at the end of the year in April. Nothing would be withheld. And of course, that makes it a lot less likely that they're going to collect all of their money, right? So they instituted a income tax withholding. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce those to you. Each chapter has some articles that give you a little bit more insight on all of this stuff. So, where are we here? All right. Let's talk a little bit. Okay, so I've got another video for you. Anybody have any questions in the meantime?